Dear viewers, good afternoon. I'm glad to welcome you to the Synthesit YouTube channel, where we continue to share information about the beneficial properties of the mineral synthesit. And today we will take a closer look at the background. Let's talk to the project leader, Roman Vladislavovich Karabanov. Roman, good afternoon once again.
Hello, Daria.
We will start the podcast and address the most popular questions from our viewers and subscribers. Roman, the most frequently asked question that we will start with is, why is it called synthesit?
If to delve into the history, the company that created this synthesit, it was called Synthesit. And we were looking for a name that would, first of all, highlight the unusual origin of this substance, meaning to emphasize that it is synthesized, that there is nothing like it on Earth, which is why it was named Synthesit. And it is in tune with the name of the company, Synthesit. So Synthesit Tech produces synthesit, which makes sense. So, well, as we have already mentioned on our resources, the feature of synthesit is that in this iron, even the isotopic composition is slightly different from the natural one. And here, I'm not even mentioning all the other properties. We'll probably talk about that later today, but even the isotopic composition, it is different, and some physical properties are have slight deviations. That's why we named it synthesit.
For our viewers, we will attach an analysis of the isotopic ratio, correctly conducted in the laboratory, so that it would be clear.
Yes. By the way, we did this on our own equipment. Until 2019, we were more focused on research activities, and for that, we used mass spectrometers with inductively coupled plasma, which are capable of measuring even the isotopic composition. And I would also like to point out that, in fact, these mass spectrometers might be found in some institutions, but the people who are capable of measuring the isotopic composition, specialists, there aren't that many. And actually, we at Synthetech have figured this issue out because the topic of mass spectrometry is very complex. And we sorted it out with her, and thanks to this, we were able to discover this isotopic anomaly.
From this knowledge of the technology, the next question arises. What was the purpose of creating the new element, and what idea guided the scientists when testing this technology?
Look, the original goal was to create an element to put it in a capsule, but we didn't have that. That is, we actually studied there we were more focused on applied experimental physics. That is, they studied some physical properties there. Phenomena that are very poorly studied, very poorly described. And so during this work, we obtained a certain iron mineral, and then we started to look at it, study it, examine its properties, thinking about how to apply it, considering maybe in some kind of catalysis, or perhaps somewhere else. And, in fact, we had several indirect sources that suggested this element could be very useful, very interesting in the field of health. The element could be very useful, very interesting in the field of health. And then we decided to conduct. It's a very small experiment. Actually, the first experiment wasn't. You might know about the experiment on mice, but actually there was another experiment on plants. It was a small, simple experiment. There were two little plots. We watered one plot as a control and the other experimentally. We watered one with our preparation. The other one without it, we looked, and it seemed the one that we watered with the preparation is growing significantly. Better. There are more buds. It grew taller. But this is such a poor model of a plant. I mean, it's completely unsuitable as a model, so it can't be transferred to humans in any way. That's why. But the only thing was that, after all, the experimental plot was growing really well, and we were very curious about why that was the case. And plus, we had some indirect data about how this could be beneficial for health. And so we decided to conduct an experiment with mice. And here it is. We registered in the Russian veterinary systems. We underwent training to work with mice. These were special laboratory mice from near St. Petersburg, a special vivarium where they are grown mice. Laboratory mice have this unique feature. They are all like twins to each other. So genetically, they are absolutely identical individuals. I mean, they are all like twin brothers to each other. The SHK line. So, we got these mice. Oh, by the way, an interesting fact. I mentioned that we had some indirect data. The model of the experiment was a bit different. We wanted to irradiate these mice with X-rays and see how bone marrow, that is, both groups are irradiated with X-rays so that they receive damage there, and see as if how with the iron that we received, we had indirect data that perhaps these mice will have bone marrow in slightly better condition, which is, by the way, why we studied bone marrow. But when we were training, we realized that even for ethical reasons, we don't have the right to use these mice. Torture them, that's the first thing, but secondly, it turned out that it's actually very difficult to get the necessary dose of X-rays. So we figured it was necessary. Simple devices, like household ones that emit X-rays, they need to illuminate these mice for weeks just to give them a weak dose that might be noticeable in their bodies at the cellular level. So it was simply decided to create two groups and observe them, the tissue, to see how much it synthesizes toxic, because there was a suspicion that it has a reverse property, meaning it's not just non-toxic, but it has a positive effect on health. And by the way, that's exactly why we did the histology of the bone marrow. The first thing we noticed when we got these mice was that our experimental group, unlike the control group, it is much more active. And these mice, there they are, we discovered this, we came up with a small system. They have wheels, and they run on these wheels. We just put a counter on these wheels, and they started to spin this counter. And I was saying that the mice are twins. So, the experimental group made twice as many rotations in that moment compared to the control group. And for the twins, that's still a lot. There, the order of numbers was 400,000 revolutions for the control group and 800,000 revolutions for experimental, so that's twice as much. So they were actually twice as active. This was very surprising, very impressive. We decided to check another parameter. We decided to test their strength. So for him, we got this dynamometric tool. We created an experiment protocol, conducted the experiment, and also got some absolutely phenomenal results. These mice like this, these mice like this, again, from the experimental group, it turned out that they are pulling their stick there. Their strength, in short, is 30% higher than that of the control group. That's a lot for the mice. And then we realized that this was very interesting, and basically all that was left for us was to analyze the tissues, how toxic the element actually is. We sent this to the Research Institute of Medical Primatology. We made arrangements there, because it's the top lab in Russia with the best specialists. At the Research Institute of Medical Primatology, it prepares all the data for vaccines, for various drugs, for dietary supplements. They very rarely get up, meet with dietary supplements, because they mainly do preclinical trials. But we provided them with these animals. And there, too, we encountered a very interesting opinion. There, at the lab director, when he performed the autopsy on these mice, he noted that it's generally not typical for laboratory mice to have their tissues in good condition. Well, I mean, these vivariums, these mouse breeding facilities are still budget institutions. They are basically fed the most cheap food. Not because the breeding facilities are bad, but because such a system of government procurement buys them the cheapest stuff available on the market. So they check that the mouse, as a model, has some parameters that are more or less decent, meaning the mouse is generally healthy from a health perspective. But no one looks into histology into the cells there. And the cells there at the cellular level, everything is always very bad there. They're just in terrible condition. So again, the experimental group, as we were told, Tribulgin, it was in perfect condition. At the cellular level, it was in perfect condition. And this really impressed us a lot. It surprised us greatly. And at that moment, we basically decided to move forward here in the field of dietary supplements. So then we conducted a few more toxicity tests. And basically the next step is an experiment on monkeys. So we weren't doing it ourselves anymore. The experiment, we didn't control it, meaning we had full control with the mice. With monkeys, it was a completely commissioned experiment. The drugs caught the attention outside of medicine. Medical primatology, they offered a design for the experiment because the experiment is expensive. It was also expensive with the mice, but of course it's nothing compared to the costs with the monkeys, even though they are not expendable, meaning we didn't do histology on them, we just ran tests, but still it was quite expensive. And on the monkeys, it showed completely phenomenal results. We chose the herd of older monkeys. And on our website, basically, there are the most important results. The most important result is a 40% reduction in total cholesterol. And since these are older monkeys, it's 100% always bad cholesterol. It goes down because then the older the body gets, the more it actually increases. Not good cholesterol, but bad cholesterol. So, before, doctors just looked at the fact that cholesterol had risen. And it was assumed by default that the bad cholesterol had increased, because if the good cholesterol has increased, then a person feels just great. LT, AST, other blood parameters, all of this improved, and quite significantly there were. In primatology, we are very impressed with these results. And then we already, in principle, by this time, we had already released the drug onto the market and had already begun to receive some feedback. And here it is. The first reviews were absolutely phenomenal and fantastic. And so, based on this feedback, we received some feedback on a certain topic, and then we chose which direction to take the research. Because the research is insanely expensive, but if we were confident, well, not confident, at least if we had a solid foundation to conduct this research, we would order this research. We hardly conducted the research ourselves, we only did, we described a few clinical cases that we were received. So, that is, all the research that we have conducted is research that are done in budget institutions. So we order it, we are the clients there.
Viewers who wish to learn more about the results and reports of scientific research are invited to visit the website synthesis.ru. This is the manufacturer's website, where in the research section you can see all the available reports. For those viewers who are even more interested in seeing how the metrics changed in the control group of mice, we invite you to our YouTube channel, where you can see the recorded metrics and growth, where an increase in the endurance of the control group was noted. Roman, thank you for answering the question. Another point that really interests our viewers: why iron specifically and not another element? And is a release planned? Bioavailable calcium, zinc, or other elements?
Yes, I'll explain. The thing is, we have developed a stable technology for obtaining iron. For other elements, it wasn't as stable. Regarding zinc, in our original reactors, we were able to obtain it. We even isolated a certain amount of zinc and considered the possibility of trying it out. So, to conduct an experiment, again on animals. But the thing is, the technology didn't stagnate. On site, we started using brass elements. In the reactor, brass contains zinc. And that's why it turned out that our installations are contaminated with zinc. That is, it will be impossible to say that this zinc is 100% obtained in some unusual way. Because after all, it is contaminated with calcium. The situation is a bit different. We seem to see a lot of calcium, well, thing is, it is surrounded by it. There are a lot of us. This, by the way, is a very big problem in mass spectrometry because it's calcium. He also has this mass of 40, and even when we measure it with a mass spectrometer, it uses for ions, for breaking down molecules. Argon also has a circular mass, meaning this circular mass is heavily saturated. And we have problems measuring calcium. It's hard to measure. We have issues with calcium, with contamination, because everything around us is made of calcium. And so, to say that we got this much calcium, it's very difficult because it's very easy to contaminate it. The situation with iron is a bit different. Our task is simply to remove the iron and replace it with other metals, everything around it. Basically, we even know repeated screening what percentage we could potentially contaminate it. We also tested that, but with calcium, with zinc, there was also selenium, but we had a problem with selenium. With the extraction, there's just too little of it. We needed to collect a large amount of material in order to extract this selenium. And basically, its biological role, it's significant, but not as significant as iron. After all, everything revolves around iron. And the peculiarity of this iron is that it has such phenomenal bioactivity. And it even affects the bone marrow. That is, it gets inside the bone marrow. And there starts processes. Here, of production. Stem cells. The process of producing stem cells, yes. This phenomenon is most likely only related to iron. Yeah, by the way, I didn't mention that the main result of these studies outside of medical primatology was discovered that in the tissues, the bone marrow cells of hematopoiesis doubled in density. So, why is this interesting and important? The thing is that a person, as they age, loses, it turns out, the density of their, loses density, loses the number of stem cells. And the number of stem cells is very closely tied to the density of the bone marrow. And if a child has one stem cell for every 10,000 regular cells, while an elderly person, he already has one stem cell, 1 million. And this also has a huge impact on the recovery of all tissues. And so when we, in fact, influence on the bone marrow, that's exactly when this effect of rejuvenation and regeneration occurs, which many have heard, many have noticed. So we have some truly phenomenal stories there on our website. And I think this is related to the influence on the bone marrow.
Thus, when initially describing the properties of the mineral and the characteristics of its work, we rely on studies that were conducted on animals. How relevant are they for humans?
Yes, it is. It's actually a complex question. In general, in the classics, in science, people usually move from simple models to more complex ones, and then already to humans. So basically, we repeated an absolutely classic approach. So we started with a simple model, which is a mouse, then moved on to a more complex biological model, which is a monkey. And then, in fact, we conducted several studies on humans, some preclinical, simple ones, but still. We were lucky we managed to do it. Why us? Extrapolate the results obtained from mice to humans. We have indirect reasons for this. That is, we notice regeneration in people, we notice rejuvenation in some individuals, an increase in energy, and this indirectly suggests that this effect is related to the influence on the bone marrow. And such an experiment on humans to check their bone density, in fact, is most likely not possible. We considered this possibility. We even had a volunteer call us. He really wanted to try it, but when he found out that it involved taking a sample, essentially doing a bone marrow injection, which is incredibly painful and, by the way, dangerous, it became clear that this wouldn't be possible. So we're working with indirect data here, but I can say that many drugs, not just biological supplements, but drugs in general, they operate on data and refer to data, specifically the most basic data from simple organisms like mice. And in principle, these results are taken very seriously by the scientific community, especially in terms of toxicity, in terms of interaction with various drugs. That is, mice are not a bad model. We're not extrapolating to humans the fact that they will run twice as much or be 30% stronger. Although, in fact, we have, several reports where people who are professional athletes have noted an increase in strength. And we even conducted a study at the Veliko-Lukskaya Academy of Sports. There was a group of marathon runners, and they got some very interesting results, like a reduction in heart rate. Under load, they saw an increase in power by body weight by about 6% or 4%. But for marathon runners, this is a very significant result. Subjectively, we have athletes, bodybuilders, who didn't measure it, but they said that their working weights with lure increased very significantly. So serious that we have, let's say, a story. There was one blogger, Ivan Krasovin. We provided him with the material. We agreed with him about advertising, that he would check how it works, how our drug works, and he made this such a small test. Took the drug, measured his strength before the drug, measured his strength after the drug, and there was some amazing growth, but his subscribers simply did not believe that it was possible. They all thought that he was just probably is faking it. And that's why he actually removed the video where our integration was, well, that's true, lyrics.
And also, Roman, the results that athletes achieve are confirmed by our customers who don't engage in sports but notice an increase in endurance and a decrease in shortness of breath in their daily lives. Now we already know what causes this. Improvements in their well-being. We received research results on mitochondria that showed an increase in ATP synthesis in the mitochondria. We received research related to maximum oxygen consumption as a parameter of aerobic capacity. Tell us more about this study.
Yes. This study was conducted in Budapest. It took place in 2022. A man saw him off in sports medicine. This is the number. Well, he's roughly in the top 10, as far as I know. It's by the name of Soft Redek, a Hungarian researcher. It wasn't just him, it was an international group. There were Japanese in it, there were Chinese in it, there were representatives from Europe. Actually, I'm even listed there. The only thing I did was just pass on the product, so I didn't really participate there, but since I passed on the product, I passed on some data and they already included me in there. So the study really showed an increase in ATP synthesis. The model, by the way, is also not people, and they actually took it very seriously because Zsolt Radek, there was also a very interesting story because he is number in the top in the world in sports medicine. One of the most cited, he submitted his article, as usual, to the journal Nature, the most prestigious journal in the world. But in the journal Nature, they said that something was off, that it was just too much. Phenomenal results. And they refused to accept it because they couldn't believe the results. And they had to publish it. In no less significant journal, it's Frontiers, the Swiss journal Frontiers. The nutrition divisions. But the result, it confirms everything, all that was before. So, we have there, athletes noted, an increase in both strength and endurance, and most importantly, adaptability to loads.
The main component of all the products in the line is indeed iron, which is what we're talking about right now. There may be additional assets present, there can be different forms of release, but the main component is iron.
Yes.
And excess iron is harmful?
Yes.
So why does the synthesizer have so few contraindications and no side effects?
Yes, that's really the case. But the thing is that it says like this, it says like that. if you notice, there's actually not that much iron in our product. So it's actually not a homeopathic dose yet, but in any case, it's very small. So that's just 20% of the daily norm. This is the absolute minimum, which, for example, in supplements, this is related to the fact that we found that even such a dose is sufficient to, for some unclear reason, replenish iron deficiency. Well, for some unclear reason, it seems that this is still related to the improvement, since the synthesizer enhances blood circulation, most likely, improving blood flow in the small intestine, which in turn improves absorption of iron that a person gets from food, and just like that. So, most likely, an increase in ferritin, hemoglobin, and other indicators of ours. Consumers. Indeed, there are no side effects because, first of all, a low dose. Secondly, apparently the biological role is very positive. Indeed, the restrictions only apply to pregnant and breastfeeding women, but again, these restrictions also apply to children, by the way. These restrictions are still related to certification because the product is simply not certified. To conduct them on them, to certify for pregnant women, breastfeeding mothers, and children. They need to be tested on pregnant women, breastfeeding mothers, and children, and that's very complicated. So we probably won't tackle this in the near future, so this will be very, very soon. We practically have no barrels. Very rarely do we get this. It's literally a handful out of thousands. We get that small. A slight intestinal upset. But most likely it's not related to the amount of iron in our product, but rather to the fact that blood flow is simply improving. The microcapillaries start to work, including in the liver and other organs. Perhaps some toxins are being released from the liver, meaning they start to be metabolized and eliminated by the body. And this may have something to do with it, but we get such feedback very rarely. It's literally just a handful in my memory. And it's literally just one day, no more. So with regular iron, if you look at it, side effects occur much more often.
Yes, that's true. And it's more accurate to call it not a side effect, but rather an adaptation of the body to increased capillary blood flow.
It might even be detoxification.
Yes, probably so. As far as we know, the first micrograms of the mineral were obtained in 2019, so the history of the synthesis of it is just a few years old. You could say that the mineral has appeared recently. Yes. How can we claim that the synthesizer is completely safe for humans? What if we haven't conducted control measurements over several decades? How safe is it for future use? In the measurable future?
Yes, this question is actually quite complex. But if you look, basically most drugs, even pharmaceuticals, even those with complex molecules, even when they're injected directly into the vein, they're injected straight into the blood. They don't undergo such studies. We start from the following. So there are some parameters. The first parameter is biochemistry. We know that biochemistry improves with synthesize. That's absolutely right, and it's confirmed by numerous studies. The only thing that could have raised some doubts is actually the DNA and the coding of various genes. But we also conducted a small study. In vitro, we obtained data that, for example, there is a youth gene, Clotho, that the sun, our drug increases. The in vitro expression of this gene. That's also a very interesting result. We found that the main goal of the study was to see if there was any improper gene expression, but on the contrary, we got a very good result. So, from the perspective of DNA, the drug definitely does not damage it. And so we can confidently say that long-term side effects, they simply can't exist. It's just that if they existed, they would have to be due to what? Due to some kind of cumulative effect, some negative cumulative effect. But we did not find this negative cumulative effect at all. So we didn't find any negative effects at all. So stem cells and cells. Stem cells increase. DNA. Positive genes are expressed more actively. toxins we also know are eliminated because we conducted studies with Olga Shankorovna and Anatkina. Toxins, the most serious ones, are the toxins that people get from chemotherapy, that is, chemotherapeutic drugs. They are tolerated more easily, not harder, but easier. And by the way, we have a few more clinical cases, very interesting ones, 2 clinical cases about people who received chemotherapy. And in general, we want to move towards support during chemotherapy is really promising. We have fantastic results. And there are truly amazing reviews. And this aspect needs to be studied. Support during chemotherapy is very promising, it's necessary, it's important, and we are moving in that direction. But overall, if we take 3 parameters, biochemistry, genetics, and toxins, then in all 3 parameters we only get positive results. So there can't be any long-term negative results. We have received several reviews about that. Children born to mothers who took synthesites are in general doing great, and there haven't been any problems there either. There's even a small group that used Synthesit during breastfeeding to improve lactation. But this is a bit of a borderline topic, because in fact the drug is not recommended during breastfeeding since it hasn't been studied thoroughly. So it's a complex topic, but basically we haven't found any negative effects anywhere. And long-term negative effects should still be related to something. With some kind of cumulative effect. Any negativity in the moment? Well, there might also be some psychological impact, but we also note a positive psychological effect. So even people who don't notice this, they give to friends, spouses, and they note that their mood improves. So overall, the mood almost always improves. So we didn't receive any reviews that in humans, their mood or psychological state worsened from the drug. On the contrary, maybe this is, again, not related to psychology, but rather to biochemistry, perhaps some deficiencies. Some other elements were replenished because, again, the absorption in the small intestine increased, and it was able to restore itself. Some deficiencies, like potassium, iodine, or something else, and was able to solve some of their own problems. Well, basically...
Dear viewers, please watch this interview until the end. We've prepared a nice surprise for you at the end of this video. About the increase in endurance, I would also like to point out that we have reliable results from athletes who regularly note the parameters of working weights, running speed especially, if they are marathon runners. We are in contact with several athletes, some of whom are very well known. Could you tell us more about their results and what they shared?
Yes. So, if we talk about sports, the situation was like this. We first discovered this in mice, and then we conducted an experiment at the Velikoluksky Institute. Oh, by the way, there was also an interesting story at the Velikoluksky Academy of Sports. One of the members of this groups that received the synthesis, they are the same. They don't know what they're getting, so we ordered a study, and the researchers didn't tell them that they liked their results so much. What he managed to find out from them about what this drug is, got in touch with us, and shared his story about how he started buying it, taking it, and he took some prize places. And I would like to point out here, I found it very interesting that his story, this person's name is Sergey, I think I might be mistaken. The thing is, he's not just an athlete who only does sports, only marathons. No, actually he had a main job, and it was some kind of physically demanding work. He had to work on it, then train after work, and then he had very little time left for recovery. And in these tough conditions, he managed to maintain top shape, win, and set his personal record. And basically, to be in high-performance sports at the national level. It's a very interesting story. By the way, why did I like it? because in general, sports provide a phenomenal boost to a person's quality of life. But usually we just don't have the energy for sports because we've worked and we're already out of strength. And that's exactly where Synthesit can help address this problem. Well, maybe not for everyone, but at least for some. So, when a person's energy level rises, they simply have enough strength to engage in sports. And there are even stories like that, not just about sports, but about high-performance sports. Well, I got a little off topic. Among athletes, when we conducted this research, we started reaching out to sports teams. At first, we thought that sports teams would be the ones to take us on because the research results from the Veliki Luki Academy are impressive and we could appeal to that. And basically, we called all the sports teams and basically, in most cases, we were switched to sports doctors because the coaches weren't really interested in what was being taken, what kind of vitamin support there was. In order to be there, absolutely. To appeal to them, we received such a certificate. WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency. At the Cologne branch, we submitted our samples, and every year since 2022, we updated the data for the Cologne list. We were on this Cologne list, but unfortunately, in 2024, we were removed from the Cologne list, not because we had any doping in the product, but simply because they refused to accept our contribution. The factory is for the research because they said that Russia is under sanctions. We can't receive the contribution for the research from you, and we won't be getting contributions from any of your partners. So even though our samples were ready, packed, and we had already sent them, they refused to accept them, and we were removed from that list. In WADA, unfortunately, but nevertheless, nothing has changed for us. Our athletes are taking part. Athletes are competing in international competitions. They are constantly undergoing doping tests, and there haven't been any stories about doping, so there were none. Although, on the other hand, the drug actually provides a very significant boost. Advantages? Wow. Among such interesting teams, which we really wanted to work with, we managed to interact. It's the rugby team Strela. But there, again, it's a unique situation because we got transferred to the chief doctor, and the chief doctor turned out to be someone who trains with the team himself. It's a completely unique situation because usually the team doctor is a chubby guy who sits in his office and he's thinking about something. Oh no, he tried everything on himself, tested all the loads, checked everything, and he tried our product. He kind of, gave it to some of his athletes, those who were lacking hemoglobin, and they got results. I don't know if it's related to our product or not, but and as far as I know, their sports career took off and they won prize places at the Russian championships. Although, as far as I remember, they were still somewhere in the middle of the list. Maybe it's not related to our product, but nevertheless, the fact is we provided it to them. We reached out to other teams. Actually, there was a sports team, a football team, I unfortunately can't name it. And the situation there was such that we know that they used our product, they purchased it, and they took it, and they there from practically the lowest positions. Those are the first leagues, not the first leagues, but the top leagues. They climbed all the way to the top. But unfortunately, they didn't reach out to us. They didn't pass on this information to us. And this reflects the problem with athletes. Those who are helped by this, they very rarely make contact. If they have an advantage, they try to hide that advantage as much as possible, and that's what we encountered here. That's what we encountered. Among those people who are a bit more open, a bright example of such individuals is Kristina Koroleva and Maxim Korolev. We met them quite by chance. They had training sessions here in the city of Sochi, literally not far from our office. As far as I remember, they wrote to us. We met with them. We literally talked to them over the fence. This is the Spook Sport. and provided them, they tried our product. They liked it during those training sessions and so on. We started collaborating. We started measuring results, and in principle, their results went up, and especially Kristina Koroleva has a sports career. She went up, although she was only a little over 30, and she was on the Russian national team. That is, it's like the highest level in Russia, but they say that the trainers had already hinted to her that although, 30 years is already an age in sports, when you can start looking towards some coaching activities. And you shouldn't take up a spot on the national team. But she raised her results to an unprecedented level, setting personal records. She won the Russian championship in high jump. She won against Olympic champion Maria Lositskaya at one of the stages of the Russian championship. Kenna achieved some really impressive results. Of course, it's clear that this is primarily her achievement, but still there. The fact remains a fact. Here, there might be some influence, maybe a small one, like 1-2%, but our drug is part of this whole story. Maxim Korolevoy, he is already more involved in coaching activities. He too. He has raised several very promising athletes. We occasionally share about this on our social media. Tessie, Dimitri, there are more people there. Among bodybuilders too, our drug has received some interesting results. Although, bodybuilding is such a sport, it's not exactly perfectly clean. So there are no questions about doping there. And there the problem is even, you could say, the opposite. So Nikita just highlighted that he was using doping, he was taking steroids. Anabolic, and it had a colossal impact on his body. And he had very high cholesterol, he had elevated ALT and AST. And Synthesit was able to help him in this case. Lower cholesterol, lower ALT, AST, and reduce toxic effect. Anabolic steroids. Here, it is. Another bright representative of this sport is Dmitry Murzin. We collaborate with him. He's a vibrant personality. He competes himself. He's also an organizer of competitions, some of which are really interesting, in various paired categories in the field of bodybuilding. He also noted improvement in endurance, increasing weights. Reducing the need there with this in pharmaceutical support with these steroids, and overall improvement in health and mood. By the way, he even mentioned us in his book. There were very bright results from athletes, those with a world-renowned status, like fighters, MMA fighter, Alexander Shlemenko. So, a person with such a very... He also noted the growth in positive reputation, he noted the increase in endurance, he noted the increase in strength, indicators, and various parameters that helped him win. This is a very interesting interview, it's on our channel, and it's completely real. I would like to point out at this moment that Shlemenko, there were no financial components in our relationship. So this person is completely unbiased. And he rated our product very positively. Grigory Drozd is the world boxing champion. He is currently more active as a host, and he is also a very vibrant personality. And he also rated our product very positively. He learned about it from Shlemenko. He tried it, noted it, and even called it the secret weapon of Russian sports. So this is directly from him. This is very, very high. A very high rating. Another bright representative of sports is Evgeny Makarov. You can find it on the internet. This is the marathon runner's diary. He runs a blog. He noted an improvement. His adaptability as far as I understood, to the time zones. And reduction with reduction. Heart rate reduction. From 150 to 130. So basically, under load, his heart found it easier to pump blood, and accordingly his body coped better with the loads. So we know about this. We received similar data at the Veliki Luki Academy of Sports. There was also a reduction in heart rate, and it is connected with the phenomenon of blood thinning. That is, when the blood thins, the more liquid the blood, the lighter it is. It's easier for the heart to pump it, and under load, a person generally feels better and lighter.
And it's also important to note that Evgeny achieved his results in a different, hotter climate.
Yes.
And the marathon runners we studied at the Veliki Luki Academy of Sports were on exercise machines.
Yes, we have photos. They're all covered in sensors. To measure, there's a special mask to measure how much carbon dioxide he exhaled. Yes, so it was a very serious study. Actually,
Roman, one more thing. As far as we know, during the initial testing of the mineral, some very surprising facts about blood thinning were discovered. Could you tell us more about the circumstances under which this was discovered and how it ultimately affected things?
yes, it actually came to light by chance. We didn't discover this. We provided our product to the blogger, Vergaev. You can find it on YouTube. He tests products to see how they interact with blood. He just took it and checked how the Synthesit works. And it turned out that the Synthesit has this effect. It's called red blood cell disaggregation, or something like that, right? Disaggregation of red blood cells. Well, if we just talk about blood thinning, but I would like to point out that blood thinning, when we talk about blood thinning, well, the medications you buy at the pharmacy, it's a bit of a different situation there. They just add plasma from tissues into the blood. And these little clumps of red blood cells that are stuck together, they still remain clumped. They might break apart a little from the blood flow, but they still don't disaggregate the red blood cells. That's a completely different story. Disaggregation of red blood cells is achieved only by the method of IVL, which is intravenous laser irradiation. That is when a small laser irradiates inside the blood, and that's where the disaggregation of red blood cells happens. And here we are. When we saw this result, he posted it. That is, we didn't know. We just provided him with the product. We didn't know what the result would be. But it actually answered a lot of questions regarding health. Why do people feel so good, so light? Energetically. Next, we started to explore this topic in more detail. We set up a microscope and checked everyone who interacts with us. There are some really interesting stories there. To our guests, we had a guest from India, Chakropani. We also did it. And we always got this result, the disaggregation of red blood cells. What are the advantages here? It's clear that when red blood cells are clumped together, they have a hard time getting into the microcapillaries. When they have a hard time getting into the microcapillaries, oxygen deprivation occurs. The organs and tissues, they seem to be functioning, but they're still operating in a state of hypoxia. That's not very good. There was even such a thing, well, now it's such a rarity, such a theory. Let's say exotic. But at some point it was believed that all states of the body, all diseases, they are connected in one way or another with hypoxia, with the effect of hypoxia. Now it's not like that. People understand biochemistry better, but nevertheless the significance of hypoxia is still very high. And when we say that people write to us, it's not like Synthesit helped me, for example. There with hypothyroidism, problems with the thyroid gland. We understand that this is simply related to the fact that a person's circulation has improved. So, the microcapillaries that fill all the organs allow blood to flow better, carry oxygen more effectively, and remove carbon dioxide more efficiently. And it's not just that, by the way, and in general the exchange, nutrients are absorbed better. Thus, when all of this improves, the organ starts to function better. That's why there's this kind of effect there, probably something like that. Overall positive health improvement for the body.
As we understand it, Synthesit improves the oxygen transporting properties of the blood. enhancing gas exchange in the tissues. But, for example, for professional climbers who ascend to high altitudes, where there is a lack of oxygen, where the air is thin, this can also be somewhat beneficial. Are there any results in this regard?
Yes, there are 100% results. By the way, one of the first athletes who got in touch with us was Gela Klish. She was into running, and she was doing mountain running. And one of the main problems there is hypoxia, that is a lack of oxygen. It's hard to breathe, because at high altitudes the air is thinner, and she noted that it became easier for her to handle these loads at high altitude. And then it was as if we started measuring oxygenation and noticed this effect of improved blood oxygenation in people. So it all actually started, by the way, with athletes, with Gela.
Dear viewers, and those who watch this video interview to the end will receive a 20% discount from us using the promo code PODCAST. Click the link in the description to order Synthesit at a discount. Roman, thank you for such a fruitful conversation.
Thank you.
You revealed a lot of interesting information about the history of the mineral for our viewers. Well, we invite viewers to leave their questions and comments under the video. We will discuss the most interesting ones in the next podcast.